The Galactic Empire descended upon the human colony without a hint of hesitation. Their sleek warships, with gleaming surfaces and cutting-edge technology, cast long shadows over the barren landscape. The Empire's soldiers, clad in advanced armor and carrying energy-based weaponry, immediately began their assault on the unsuspecting human outpost. They had no reason to believe their victory would be anything but certain. The humans, after all, were no match for the might of the Empire, whose weapons could disintegrate entire battalions with a single shot. The invading fleet's leader, General Varric, had faced countless species in battle, all of whom had bowed to the Empire's superior technology. This would be no different. From the moment the first alien drop pod hit the ground, chaos erupted. The humans, who had lived in relative peace for years, scrambled to mount a defense. They had no plasma cannons, no mechs, no shields. Their primary means of protection were old-fashioned artillery pieces, aging tanks, and mortar systems that had been in use long before the colony's founding. To the Empire, it was laughable. Varric watched the humans from his command post, his armored hand clasping the cold metal of his console as he surveyed the scene. "Pathetic," he muttered, surveying the human soldiers taking cover behind primitive stone walls and rusted vehicles. "What are they trying to do? Fight with iron and fire?" The human forces fired back, but their weapons were nothing more than ancient rifles, old tanks, and a collection of outdated mortars. The shells barely even made a dent in the Empire's advanced shield systems, which absorbed the impact with ease. The Empire's troops stormed forward, their plasma rifles cutting down human soldiers with brutal precision. Each human shot seemed futile, each strike of their artillery a slow, clumsy gesture against an unstoppable force. The human commander, General Emma Cross, watched the enemy advance from her command post, the cold reality of the situation settling in. The Empire's first wave had overwhelmed their outer defenses in minutes. She knew the full-scale assault was coming, and her forces, under-equipped, under-trained, and outgunned, had no way of stopping it. "We need to pull back, General," one of her officers urged, the desperation clear in his voice. "We can't win this fight. We need to fall back to the secondary defenses and regroup." Emma hesitated. She had never expected to face such overwhelming force, but surrender was not in her blood. She had led human forces in countless skirmishes, and each time they had found a way to turn the tide. But this was different. The Empire was relentless. "No," she said, her voice steady despite the panic rising in the ranks. "We stay. We hold our ground. The Empire thinks we're weak, let's show them how wrong they are." Across the battlefield, her soldiers huddled behind their old tanks, firing sporadically into the advancing enemy. Their mortars launched from fortified positions, but each explosion barely caused a ripple. Alien troops laughed as they tore through the human defenses, cutting down anything that moved. The humans had no hope of winning in direct combat. But Emma knew there had to be something more. She had read the reports on the Empire's weakness, their overconfidence. The humans had a deep understanding of the land, the environment. They knew the terrain better than any invader could. If they couldn't win by firepower, they would win through strategy. But even Emma wasn't certain it would be enough. Meanwhile, Varric paced at his command center, watching the devastation unfold. The human resistance was stubborn, and their tenacity was somewhat impressive. But their technology? A joke. His soldiers would crush them beneath their boots. With a sneer, he watched as a human tank fired off a round in their direction, the shell barely reaching the base of one of his troops before disintegrating into nothingness. "What are they trying to accomplish?" Varric muttered. "No matter how many times they fire, it won't change the outcome." One of his subordinates, a young alien officer, dared to speak up. "General, the humans seem to be using their mortars in an attempt to disrupt our formations. But it's ineffective. Their old weapons aren't a threat to us." Varric nodded, a knowing grin spreading across his face. He had seen this type of resistance before, humans relying on outdated tactics and weapons. It was almost charming in its futile defiance. "They don't realize the scale of the difference between us. They can fight all they want, but it won't matter. Our technology will annihilate them. With a wave of his hand, Varek issued the order for the second wave. The aliens' dropships began to land, their advanced troops unloading with even greater firepower. It was a show of force, and Varek was certain that within hours, the humans would be begging for mercy. But Emma wasn't ready to give in. As she watched her soldiers take cover, fire back, and launch more futile mortars, a thought began to form in her mind. The Empire was arrogant. They had underestimated humanity's resilience, and perhaps that would be their downfall. Emma's eyes scanned the horizon, spotting the ridgelines just beyond the battle. That was it. They wouldn't win by matching the Empire's strength with more strength. They would have to turn the Empire's arrogance against them. "Lieutenant," she called to one of her officers, who was hunched over a communication device, "prepare the mortar teams for a different kind of strike. We're going to need more than brute force." Her orders were precise. The plan would involve using the terrain to their advantage, hiding mortars in strategic locations, placing them just out of sight from the Empire's sensors. If the mortars couldn't match the Empire's power, they could still disrupt their formation. And that disruption might just be enough to create an opening. The Empire's advance continued, their forces pushing deeper into human territory. The aliens moved with the same arrogance that had defined their entire invasion. Varek still couldn't fathom how a species could be so far behind in terms of technology. The mortars were nothing but noisy distractions, barely worth noting. They didn't realize it yet, but humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its weapons. It was in its adaptability. Varek watched as his forces overwhelmed human lines, pushing into cities and towns with little resistance. The humans were retreating, but he still held the belief that the Empire's supremacy was undeniable. The Empire would wipe them off the map, leaving nothing behind but ashes. What Varek didn't anticipate was how deeply underestimating humanity's ingenuity could cost them. Emma knew the war wasn't lost, not yet. Not while there was breath left in her soldiers. The humans had a way of turning desperation into victory, of finding strength in places their enemies never thought to look. And right now, the Empire had no idea that they were walking directly into a trap. The battle raged on, and the humans, pushed to the brink of annihilation, had little choice but to fall back. The Empire's overwhelming firepower made it clear that a direct confrontation was futile. General Cross knew that their survival depended on turning the tide in ways the invaders could never anticipate. They couldn't match the Empire's strength, but they had something more dangerous: creativity, resilience, and a profound understanding of their environment. As her troops retreated to secondary positions, Emma ordered her commanders to remain focused. "We've been underestimated, and that's our advantage. Let's show them why humanity's never been an easy target." The human soldiers withdrew into the urban ruins and nearby forests, digging in and setting traps. Emma's thoughts raced as she analyzed the Empire's pattern of attack. Varek's forces had been overconfident, too sure of their technological superiority. They hadn't expected the humans to survive this long, let alone offer any resistance. But Emma had no intention of being written off as another easy conquest. "Get the mortar teams in position," she instructed. "We can't match them head-to-head, but we can hit them where it hurts." The Empire's forces were relentless, advancing through the scattered human defenses without hesitation. To them, these primitive fortifications were nothing more than obstacles to be crushed. Their plasma cannons burned through everything in their path, while energy shields absorbed incoming fire effortlessly. The alien troops marched in tight formations, confident that nothing could stop them. What they didn't expect was the cunning of the humans. The mortars, seemingly ineffective at first, were now being deployed in new, unexpected ways. The human forces had scattered them across the battlefield, embedding them in hard-to-spot positions among the ruins and in the dense forested areas. They weren't aiming at the Empire's front lines anymore. They were targeting their weak spots, their supply lines, and their advanced mech units, relying on hit-and-run tactics to disrupt the Empire's cohesion. In the middle of the chaos, Emma gave the signal. The first mortar round tore through the air, cutting a sharp arc before crashing into a group of alien mech walkers. The explosion sent a shockwave through the alien formation, disrupting their energy shields just long enough for the humans to exploit their vulnerability. Alien soldiers scrambled to re-establish control, but it was too late. The blast had done more than destroy the mechs, it had sent ripples through their command structure, leaving their forces disorganized and shaken. "Direct hit," one of Emma's officers reported. "We've disabled their advanced walkers." Emma's lips curved into a rare smile. The mortars, once dismissed as relics of the past, were proving more effective than anyone had thought. The key wasn't in sheer firepower, it was in how the mortars were deployed, how they were used in combination with the terrain to catch the Empire off guard. As the battle intensified, the humans continued to launch mortar rounds with surgical precision. Varric's forces were thrown into disarray, unsure how to respond to an enemy that refused to be broken by their technological might. Alien commanders, accustomed to crushing lesser species with ease, now found themselves in the midst of a situation they couldn't control. "Report," Varric barked, his voice rising in frustration as his troops began to falter. He had expected a swift victory, not this drawn-out struggle. Why are the humans still fighting back? Their mortars are causing problems, but they shouldn't be this effective. "General," one of his officers said hesitantly, "their tactics, they're unpredictable. They're using the terrain to their advantage. It's hard to pinpoint where their strikes are coming from." Varric clenched his fists. "They're using guerrilla tactics, sneaky, underhanded. We've seen this before, but we never expected it from them." Varric's arrogance had blinded him to humanity's strengths. The Empire's advanced technology may have been powerful, but it was rigid, inflexible. The human response was fluid, adaptable, and unpredictable. They weren't going to fight the Empire on its terms. They would make the Empire fight on theirs. Across the battlefield, the human forces continued their relentless assault. They weren't just firing mortars, they were causing psychological warfare, sowing confusion among the alien ranks. The occasional mortar strike, seemingly random, made the Empire's soldiers paranoid, uncertain of where the next blow would land. In the midst of the Empire's high-tech precision, the humans had become a specter, an unseen force lurking just out of reach. Varric was growing impatient. The longer the humans held on, the more their mortars took their toll on his forces. A single mortar could obliterate a squad of alien soldiers, or take out a vital piece of equipment. The shockwaves from the blasts disrupted his energy shields, forcing his troops to regroup. For the first time in the battle, the invaders were on the defensive. It wasn't a situation Varric was accustomed to, and it rattled him. "Prepare for reinforcements," he ordered, though his voice lacked the usual confidence. "We need to push forward. We can't let these primitive tactics hold us back." But as the reinforcements landed, the humans were already repositioning, adjusting their strategy to the changing tides. They knew the Empire's weaknesses. They knew their time was limited, but they also knew they didn't need to defeat the Empire in one decisive blow. They needed to keep the invaders off balance, make them second-guess their superiority. Each mortar barrage that landed was more than just an attack. It was a message to the Empire: humanity is not to be underestimated. The Empire had come expecting to steamroll the colony, to erase humanity with their superior weapons and technology. But what they hadn't accounted for was the resourcefulness of their opponent. The human ability to adapt, to use their surroundings to their advantage, had leveled the playing field. The Empire's invincibility had been shattered. Their once imposing presence was now riddled with holes, their confidence slowly eroding as they realized that humanity wasn't going down without a fight. Varric, frustrated and stunned by the unexpected resistance, began to rethink his earlier dismissal of human weaponry. Perhaps these so-called old weapons were more dangerous than they appeared. "We need to crush them now, before they gain any more ground," Varric muttered to himself, pacing back and forth. "If we let them keep this up, we might lose the initiative." But the humans weren't finished yet. Their mortars kept coming, and each strike brought them closer to turning the tide. The Empire had underestimated humanity's ability to think outside the box, to use what they had to create something devastating. The mortars, once seen as outdated relics of a bygone era, were now wreaking havoc on the Empire's forces. Humanity was no longer just surviving, they were fighting back, and for the first time in this invasion, the Empire wasn't sure they could win. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control for the Galactic Empire. The humans, whom they had so easily dismissed as primitive and unworthy of consideration, had turned the tide with their unexpected use of mortar fire. Varric, pacing frantically in his command center, clenched his fists in frustration. Every plan he had made to quickly subdue the colony now seemed irrelevant. The mortars had crippled his forces, disabled vital equipment, and thrown his entire strategy into chaos. "General, we're losing ground," one of his officers reported, the fear in his voice unmistakable. "The mortars keep hitting our supply lines and mech units. We can't sustain this kind of pressure much longer." Varric's jaw tightened. "How are they doing this? How are they so effective with mortars?" "They've adapted," the officer responded. "They're using terrain, cover, and fire tactics in ways we didn't anticipate. Their shells are landing in places we didn't think possible. Our shields are weakening with each hit." The reality of the situation began to settle in. The humans had outsmarted the Empire, turning their disadvantage into an advantage. While the aliens' technology was designed for brute force, the humans' mortars were stealthy and precise, relying on unconventional tactics that the Empire hadn't prepared for. The Empire's prideful arrogance had led them to ignore the threat that these old weapons posed. Emma Cross, on the other hand, was calm in the face of the mounting pressure. She had seen their forces faltering, but she knew that they were far from finished. The mortars had been their key to survival, but they weren't enough on their own. Now, it was time to hit harder, to apply more pressure. The humans had only one chance to take advantage of the Empire's weakening resolve, and Emma wasn't going to let it slip through her fingers. "Keep pushing the mortars," Emma ordered. "Make every round count. We'll hit their main force next." Despite the ongoing destruction of their advanced units, the Empire didn't retreat. They dug in, sending wave after wave of soldiers and reinforcements, determined to crush the human resistance once and for all. But each time they advanced, they faced the same obstacle: humanity's relentless artillery fire. The humans weren't just surviving, they were making the Empire bleed. For every mech they destroyed, for every supply line they severed, the invaders' confidence shattered just a little more. The once perfect formation of alien soldiers became a broken, disorganized mob, scrambling for cover, unsure of where the next strike would come from. Varric's voice echoed through the chaos, his frustration growing with each passing minute. "We're being ambushed. Their mortars are tearing us apart." As the Empire regrouped and attempted to launch a counterattack, the humans were already one step ahead. Their knowledge of the land allowed them to strike from hidden positions, avoiding direct confrontation with the Empire's overwhelming firepower. The humans knew that taking the Empire head-on would lead to certain defeat. But with each mortar blast, with each carefully planned ambush, they were eroding the invaders' morale. The Empire's soldiers, trained to expect instant victories, were starting to question their own superiority. One alien soldier, caught in the middle of an assault, watched in disbelief as a mortar round exploded nearby, sending a shockwave that disabled his armor's shield system. He scrambled to regroup with his unit, but the damage had already been done. The entire unit's formation was compromised, with several soldiers wounded or incapacitated by the blast. The mortars, seemingly insignificant compared to the Empire's weaponry, were now a force to be reckoned with. Back at the human command post, Emma watched the situation unfold through a series of monitors. The numbers on her side were dwindling, but so were the Empire's. The battle had turned into a test of endurance. The longer the humans held out, the more the Empire's confidence would crumble. But they couldn't afford to wait forever. Emma knew they had to keep pushing, to force the Empire into retreat before they could regroup and bring in reinforcements of their own. "Get ready to launch the next wave," she ordered. "We're going to make them regret underestimating us." She didn't need to explain further. Her officers knew exactly what was at stake. The battle had taken on a life of its own, and they were no longer just defending. They were winning. Slowly but surely, the tide had turned in their favor. The Empire, with all its advanced technology and military might, was being worn down by a force they had believed to be obsolete. The mortars, the ancient artillery, had proven to be far more deadly than anyone had imagined. Varric, in the midst of coordinating his reinforcements, was growing increasingly desperate. The situation had become a nightmare. His soldiers had taken heavy casualties, and their formation was in disarray. The mortars, once dismissed as insignificant, had taken on the form of an unstoppable force. Every attempt to regain control of the battlefield was met with more confusion, more destruction. The human resistance had learned from every misstep, adapting and outwitting the Empire at every turn. The commander's resolve began to crack. "We need air support now," he barked. "Get me the fleet. If we don't push these humans back, we'll lose this colony." But it wasn't just the Empire's soldiers who were feeling the pressure. The higher-ranking officials back at the Empire's command fleet were also growing increasingly concerned. Reports came in about the failure of their ground assault, the heavy losses suffered by their forces, and the unexpected effectiveness of the human artillery. The Empire's reputation was at risk, and if they didn't find a way to counter the mortars soon, their reputation for invincibility would be shattered beyond repair. Meanwhile, Emma and her team were more focused than ever. The battle had become a game of wits, and humanity's ingenuity was beginning to shine through. As alien reinforcements continued to pour in, the humans adapted their tactics. They didn't have the resources to match the Empire's numbers, but they didn't need to. They had already proven that with enough precision, even the most outdated weapons could change the course of history. With every mortar strike, they grew closer to victory. The Empire, once so confident in their superiority, was now scrambling to salvage a losing battle. Their advanced weapons, their superior technology, all seemed irrelevant in the face of the human determination to fight. The mortars, simple yet effective, had exposed a weakness in the Empire's overwhelming might. Varric, watching as his forces continued to falter, realized with dawning horror that the humans had done what he thought was impossible. They had not only survived, they had forced the Empire into a retreat. The invaders had underestimated humanity's adaptability, and now they were paying the price. The battle for the colony wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a declaration that humanity would not bow to any empire, no matter how advanced. Varric's command center was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding on the surface. His once sturdy confidence had crumbled under the relentless barrage of human mortar fire. His forces had been stretched thin, their lines broken, and their morale shattered. The Empire, for all its technological supremacy, was being forced into a humiliating retreat by a force they had once dismissed as inferior. The human resistance had proven more resourceful than Varric had ever imagined, and now, he could no longer deny it, the battle was slipping away from them. His officers, too, were on edge. They had grown accustomed to the power that came with advanced technology, the precision strikes, the indestructible shields, the overwhelming firepower. But all of that had proven ineffective against the ingenuity of the humans. Every time the Empire attempted to advance, they were met with well-coordinated mortar strikes that hit vital targets, crippled their mechs, and threw their forces into disarray. The human resistance was no longer just surviving, they were systematically dismantling the Empire's invasion. Varric stood before a map of the battlefield, his fingers drumming nervously on the table as he weighed his options. "We can't retreat," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "We need to crush them. Now." But even as he spoke, he knew that a full-scale assault would only lead to more casualties. The human mortars had proven too effective, too precise. They had calculated their positions well, using the terrain to their advantage and creating traps that the Empire's superior technology hadn't been able to overcome. What started as a small resistance had blossomed into a force that could no longer be ignored. Back on the ground, Emma Cross was watching the results of her strategies unfold before her. The once feared invaders were retreating. Slowly, but undeniably. Her mortars had struck key targets, disabled enemy mechs, and thrown the Empire's command structure into chaos. She wasn't just holding the line, she was winning. The humans had turned the tables, forcing the Empire to reconsider their initial underestimation. "Keep pushing forward," Emma said, her voice calm but filled with resolve. "We've got them on the ropes. They're retreating, but we need to make sure they don't regroup." Her orders were clear, and her team was responding with the same relentless focus that had carried them through the worst of the battle. The humans weren't giving the Empire any time to recover. Every mortar strike, every ambush, was designed to keep the Empire off balance and force them into a hasty retreat. This wasn't just about winning a single battle, it was about sending a message that humanity would not be trampled under the heel of an alien empire. As the human forces pushed forward, Emma couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of the situation. The Empire had arrived with their superior technology, their high-powered weaponry, their shields that could withstand almost anything. And yet, it was the mortars, the very weapons they had mocked, that had turned the tide. It was almost poetic. The Empire had expected to crush the humans with ease, but instead, they had underestimated the very tools that had kept humanity alive for centuries. "We're doing it," one of her commanders said, a note of disbelief in his voice. "They're breaking. We're forcing them to pull back." But Emma knew better than to get complacent. The Empire was still a powerful force, and a retreat didn't mean they were defeated. It just meant they were reorganizing, recalculating, looking for another way to crush humanity. Varric might have been on the back foot now, but Emma couldn't afford to let up. If the humans were going to win, they had to strike while the Empire was vulnerable. "We can't let them regroup," she repeated. "We need to force them to leave. This ends now." The humans continued their push, following Emma's command with precision and determination. The Empire's forces, now retreating in disarray, were finding themselves caught between the mortar strikes and the human infantry. The once proud invaders were now scattered, no longer fighting with the same cohesion and confidence that had marked their initial assault. It was clear that the human resistance was something Varric had never expected, something he was ill-prepared to face. Back in the Empire's command center, Varric slammed his fist on the table, his frustration boiling over. "This can't be happening," he growled. "We've faced tougher species than this before. We've destroyed entire civilizations. Why are we losing to these humans?" His officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had been trained to handle every possible threat, but humanity's tactics had been unlike anything they had encountered before. It wasn't the humans' technology that was causing them problems, it was their unpredictability, their ability to adapt to the situation and make use of every advantage they had. The Empire's precision, their reliance on overwhelming firepower, couldn't stand against that kind of ingenuity. "We've been outsmarted," one of the officers finally said, his voice low. "We underestimated them, and now it's too late." Varric knew his officer was right, but admitting defeat wasn't something he could do, not yet. "Send in everything we've got. I don't care what it takes. We're not losing to a bunch of primitive humans." But as the reinforcements landed, it was already too late. The human forces had pushed the Empire into a retreat that was turning into a rout. Every strike of the mortar, every maneuver from the human troops, was forcing the Empire back. Their once powerful presence on the planet was dwindling, disorganized, and broken. The humans had used their outdated weapons to defeat the very thing the Empire had believed would be their downfall, their arrogance. The battle that had begun with such confidence from the Empire was now ending in shame. The Empire's retreat was forced, not by the overwhelming might of their superior weapons, but by the resourcefulness of a species they had regarded as insignificant. Humanity had demonstrated that even the simplest of tools, when used with intelligence and adaptability, could be deadly. The Empire's belief in the superiority of their technology had been shattered, and now they were scrambling to save face. Emma Cross stood at the front lines, watching as the Empire's forces retreated into the distance. The battle had been long, and it had been hard. There had been casualties, moments of doubt, and times when it had seemed like victory was just out of reach. But in the end, humanity had prevailed, not with superior technology, but with superior ingenuity. They had turned the tables on the invaders, forcing them to retreat in the face of a human force they had thought they could easily crush. As the last of the Empire's forces disappeared into the distance, Emma allowed herself a moment of relief. But she knew this victory wasn't just about defeating an alien invasion. It was a statement, a reminder to the galaxy that humanity, no matter how primitive they appeared, would never go down without a fight. "We did it," one of her soldiers said, his voice filled with awe. Emma nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Yeah. We did. But don't forget, they won't stop coming. We have to be ready for the next one."